everyone. I appreciate you guys joining us. We're here with some of my good friends, masters of their craft. We're going to talk today a little bit about some of the critical but overlooked cybersecurity mitigation strategies. So we're going to kind of keep it lighthearted, keep it interactive. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A section. We'll carve out some time at the end to make sure that those questions get answered if we don't answer them throughout the presentation. So we just want to kind of educate everybody on some of the things that are typically overlooked. When you look at developing a comprehensive cybersecurity program, everyone knows how critical the technology parts are to your program. When you look at endpoint protection, the network protection, protecting at the perimeter with firewalls, everybody understands how critical those strategies are. But sometimes some of the things that are overlooked are the training, the insurance, and the compliance efforts. So that's what we're going to talk to everybody about today. So we'll go around the room, do some introductions. I'll get started. My name is Jason Rory. I am the founder, CEO of Triad Resource Group. We're based here in Houston. We are a cybersecurity advisory firm really focused on the governance, risk management, and compliance side of cybersecurity. So we help organizations go through and align their security posture with frameworks, or just do VSO type services to where just really in an effort to improve overall cybersecurity posture. And we help, consult and bring in solutions like you'll hear Andy and Shane and Randy speak to in a minute. So I'll kick it off. Andy, I'll throw it your way. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about it?
For sure. Thank you. I'm Andy Runyon with Fifth Wall Solutions, and I'm our MSP Partner Success Manager. And what that means, yes, it is a palindrome, MSP, PSM. But what it actually means is I work with MSPs, MSSPs, VSSO services, compliance groups to help kind of demystify cyber insurance. Cyber insurance has become extremely complex over the last 3 years. The apps have gone crazy. Underwriting is extremely confusing, not just to the MSP, but to the end user. So we are a cyber and tech E&O specific wholesaler, and we establish relationships with folks all across the tech industry to help take some of the pain points out of cyber insurance.
Awesome. All right, thanks. All right, Shane.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? My name is Shane Squirzelli. I'm the sales manager at Fin Security. Fin, we are an MSP-focused security awareness training and phishing platform. So everything that we're doing and everything that we're looking to do is really trying to simplify, but keep as effective as possible when it comes to training end users, as well as really making it a simplistic uplift in order to actually get something out the door and doing it effectively. So been able to work with a few of the gang here and in and out of these conversations, and really looking to kind of continue that conversation going into 2024. And I think that's kind of where my role has been. Started as the first salesperson on the Fin team, and now getting to do a little bit more thought leadership, more conversations, and really a lot more along those lines. So very much enjoying it and looking forward to today.
Awesome. Last but not least, Randy, you're up.
Thank you, sir. Great to meet you all and be here today. I'm Randy Steinley. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cyber Trust Alliance. And we took a look specifically at healthcare to begin with. But when we looked at the industry, there's a lot of high-end consulting solutions around compliance for regulatory programs. And there was a lot of do-it-yourself TurboTax-like software for doing regulatory compliance. And we saw a huge need in the small and mid-market space for a hybrid solution. So we created what we call cyber risk management, which is designed to simplify that process, save folks money, but help them be compliant and better protected from ransomware and other cyber threats, to train their folks and be prepared to live up to those standards. So a lot of focus in the healthcare space specifically, but we've been partnered with Jason for about the last 5-6 years and expanding our horizons into other areas there, and really excited to be here and talk with y'all today. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Randy. Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring everybody together. Just the reason I wanted to put this webinar together and educate everyone that's listening, on these different things. I've been consulting for organizations for the better part of 20 years, and these critical parts to an overall cybersecurity program, insurance, and Andy's going to get a lot deeper into it. It's maybe not necessarily overlooked, but misunderstood. There's a lot of organizations think they have it, and they might, but it may not be enough. There's just a lot of confusion, and Andy will speak to that. And then training as well is one thing that's overlooked in a lot of cases, and that continues to blow my mind why not every organization has some type of security awareness training program in place and happening on a routine basis. And then back to the compliance side, where like Randy was saying, there's a lot of industries out there, obviously, that are regulated, like healthcare, financial, that everybody's starting to crack down, the FTC, SEC, HIPAA, all the other three-letter agencies out there. But I still continue every day talk to organizations who are not looking at cybersecurity in a comprehensive way. They think that they have everything that they need in place because they have endpoint protection and they have a firewall. That's still the mindset, and it's but it's changing rapidly. Just the sheer thought of 5 years ago we wouldn't have really the need for this webinar, because these type of services when it comes to your cybersecurity program really wasn't around. So really, I think, Andy, I'm going to start with you. I really think insurance is probably the elephant in the room when it comes to something that's probably the most critical now. And then I just want to hear from you some of the misconceptions, you're seeing. I know you work with a lot of MSPs. I used to be an MSP, so I understand MSPs deal with tons and tons of organizations. So I'm sure you got a lot of stories. Just want to educate everybody on some cases where an organization thinks they have it, but maybe it's just, a small part. They don't have enough coverage, and just some of the things that they should consider when, coming up for renewal or getting a more advanced policy. So I'll just kick it over to you and we'll get this going.
No, I appreciate it. And it's a great place to start because, guys, if there's one thing, and I apologize, gravelly, I've got a pretty good little head cold going on right now. But one thing that I want you to take away today is the fact that not all cyber insurance is created equal, right? And what I mean by that is a lot of organizations will start out smaller. They'll establish cyber insurance through their local agent who also does their work comp insurance, their business liability, business auto maybe, and then they have this cyber add-on, and that's fine in the fledgling stages of the organization. But then year over year they grow, right? And the next thing you know, you've got this 20 million, $30 million industry that's really grown, or business that's grown. And the business far outgrows the exposure and coverage of what that original policy covers. So, number one, cyber is not all created equal. There are, BOP add-ons. There are cyber warranties through cyber solutions providers. That stuff is not full and comprehensive cyber insurance, right? So, kind of the first thing is that cyber is not all created equal. Find you a specialist that can sit down and say, hey, help you quantify your risk, explain to you where that risk is coming from, like what types of losses are common in your sector, and really quantify what the potential loss is at 15 or 30 days out, and then find you a policy that aligns with that risk. The other thing that I would say that goes along with that is insurance has really conditioned us that $1 million is enough, right? You go to the bank, you get a business loan, you get $1 million for general liability insurance. They call it good. You send them the renewal every single year. The state requires you to have $1 million of work comp insurance. Business auto, a lot of folks carry $1 million. And so we get this idea that $1 million is good. And one of the things that we do, Jason, you mentioned a story. This is a really good one that kind of encompasses all that. I live in Arkansas, if you can't tell by the Southern accent. We had a local car dealership that they kind of heard through the grapevine that our agency that I was with at the time had somebody who knew cyber. And this is right when people started talking about FTC safeguard rules to, Randy's idea about compliance, right? They had just started talking about it and they were like, man, cyber, rules and regulations, fines, we better make sure we have insurance. So they reached out and they said, hey, will you come check us out and see if we have cyber insurance? This is a 8-figure revenue business. I'm not going to tell you their name. I'm not going to tell you exactly, but I mean, they were in the tens of millions in revenue. And the guy, slid me a cyber policy and he goes, I know we have cyber insurance. Could you tell me if that's enough, And the wheels are turning. I mean, you guys have seen the meme of like Zach Galifianakis where like, all the numbers are going, that's what I look like, live on Channel 5. And I said, man, I'm going to be honest with you. I said, based on just kind of guerrilla math in my head, I think you guys have about 4 to 8 hours of cyber insurance.
Yeah.
And I mean, his eyes got huge. And I said, this is $250,000 policy. And I would guess you guys are somewhere between a $2 and $5 million risk, depending on how many days down, right? And then, by the way, it's a $250,000 policy, but it says right here that it only pays $50,000 for ransom payment. Do you have any idea what the average ransom payment was? And at the time, it was like $400K. So on that line item, he was underinsured by over $300,000. Business income. There was no funds transfer fraud on there. So, I know I'm kind of heading into the weeds and I don't want to get there, just yet, but really kind of the two big takeaways are, not all cyber is created equal. And then once you do go out to the market, if you are looking for a more mature policy with better coverage and you want to understand those coverages, make sure that the limits of the policy match your revenue exposure, because $1 million's not enough for everybody.
Yeah, and I'll kind of add to that, just based on my experience consulting with organizations, is business leaders, business owners really need to realize how technical this policy is, and especially the application. Even 5 years ago, the application was technical. It's leaps and bounds now.
Right.
So make sure as business leaders, if you're listening, engage your IT staff, engage your MSP in the application process, because without answering those questions correctly, you may not get coverage at all, or you may get the wrong coverage, like Andy's speaking to. It just needs to be a collaboration between the business leaders and the technical representation, and then pulling in somebody that understands cyber insurance, and it's nothing against insurance agents, but since cyber insurance is so technical, Jake from State Farm may not give you the right policy. And that's what, like Andy said, that's what a lot of businesses have done in the past. They just took the advice of the insurance agent that does all the other types of insurance, and under the assumption that he's taking care of us, he's given us what we need. And typically that's not the case. This is a much deeper dive. And it's just going to get, worse and worse. And I know Randy will probably speak to this, and I can too. Cyber insurance is getting so important to have, and having the right coverage. If you are facing compliance regulations and not having cyber insurance, you won't get through an audit. You won't be compliant with said framework that you need to be aligned to. And then the same is true with with awareness training, without proof of a program. And this is what kind of my segue into kicking it over to Shane and kind of get a little bit deeper into, what is the proper types of training that needs to be administered to staff? What are the frequency? How often should you be doing it? So with that, Shane, give us drop some knowledge on us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that. But yeah, as far as the training goes, it is something that's becoming more and more prevalent when it comes to compliance frameworks, when it comes to insurance and all of those kind of pieces within what we're seeing more and more, whether that's something that's required, whether it's something like a HIPAA, or if it's something for, hey, I want to be insurable. Well, you're going to need to be able to qualify for these things. And it's a difficult piece to put in place, right? Because it's not, hey, we're just going to put this firewall in place, or we're going to put this antivirus on your machine. It's, hey, we actually actually need you to be involved in this. And I think that's a big gap in where the experience has been, both for the people running that experience when it comes to making it something that's tenable and accessible and valuable for them, but also for the end user, where they need to actually take that information, digest it, and do something better the next time around, right? And I think that's been a big gap in what we've seen a lot of is people on the MSP side of it don't want to use it because it's annoying to set up, it's frustrating to get rolling, and it's a lot of heavy lifting on that front. And then it's tough to go, hey, by the way, we're going to send you a bunch of training. I always kind of reference that our training is fun, or as close as fun as you can get, right? And Connor, our CEO, actually usually uses the line, as long as you can walk away from it not hating it, that is a huge win in kind of a lot of the lines, because it is one of those things where it shouldn't be, hey, this is taking an entire day for me to do this. And really, most of the time, people are not going to take an entire hour or however long it takes to go through those trainings and really dive into what they need to understand from it. So keeping it precise, keeping it very digestible, and keeping it interactive, I think, is a huge thing that is kind of overlooked a lot of the time. Not only that, on the train or the actual testing side of the house, not punishing an end user, so that way they're not getting an experience where they feel like they're getting a slap on the wrist or something punitive on their side, where they're actually going, oh, I now learned something for the next step. So maybe clicking into a fish and actually having it immediately address what we call a learning moment of walking them through those pieces. And I think a lot of what people think of security awareness training is, hey, we're going to send you an hour-long training. You're going to have to watch it. And they go, hey, we'll put it on a different screen. We won't really pay attention to it. I'll answer the 3 questions that you give me multiple chances at the end. And then the next time around, you get a phishing email and it's like, oh, well, I'll just click on this, immediately goes through it. So it's a very weird balance of, hey, we need you to participate, but we're going to make it as easy and put it in front of you as digestible as possible. And I kind of always go back to that word of digestible, because it is something that they need to really intake and really hold it within them in order to be accessible within their understanding of what it is. And I always kind of compare it to, and we were talking about this, Jason, as well, of we could have all these great pieces in play, right? All the firewalls, again, the antivirus, whatever you may need as far as on the technical side. But I always consider that building that cybersecurity house, right? Well, training and testing is really the, hey, this is how you lock the door, right? It's the most basic of pieces, but ultimately, if you don't lock that door, it's going to be very accessible. And I could throw a bunch of numbers at you as far as how many human error issues are causes of breaches. But that is just locking the door half the time, right? Knowing, oh, this is the one thing that I need to be aware of. So a lot of that is trying to simplify it, but again, keeping it simple and effective. And I think that's exactly what the training side of the house needs to be nowadays, because it is becoming more and more prevalent when you need all the ins and outs of these different areas, whether it's insurance or compliance or specific frameworks.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And Jason, to the insurance standpoint, and I know that we're going to give Randy some time here too to talk about compliance, but I do want people to understand on the security training, the most common claim right now at this moment is wire transfer, funds transfer fraud, right? Invoice manipulation, theft of funds. If you want a mature cyber insurance policy and you're of revenue, and when I say of revenue, I mean like north of 10 mil in revenue, right? If you're not doing security training and phishing simulation with your people, good luck on getting that line item of coverage. That's where we're at. That's the change. Jason mentioned where we were 5 years ago versus where we are now. The change now is they're going to ask you about your security training program, how often, who's it through, or is there phishing simulation there? And then if the answer is no to that particular line item of coverage, which typically maxes out at 250, is either going to be sublimited to 50, 25, 10, or it's not going to be available at all.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yes, I mean, if you're an organization out there and you're not doing training, contact your MSP, your IT company immediately. Get something in place, because we all know. And Shane, you might can back up these numbers. I don't know if they're still accurate, but I think over 90% of breaches, start, with a phishing email. And when it comes to wire fraud, most likely they were able to, compromise the email to be able to play that man in the middle to do the wire fraud, because they were able to catch credentials because of a phishing email. So I was always preach, create a human firewall, because that's where the breach starts. It's much easier for a bad actor to manipulate a human being than it is a computer system. I mean, let's be real about it. So if you train your staff to be diligent and take their time and understand, and if they have any questions, stop, get clarification, especially when it comes to anything financial. Reach out to someone who can confirm that it's legitimate or not. So yeah, that's huge to do. And if you're an MSP out there, definitely make sure all your clients are being trained. Speak to someone. So with that, Randy, let's talk a little bit about the compliance world and how all this kind of comes together.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking as you guys were talking, how far all these fields overlap, right? Because we're all looking at the same things. And to me, Andy, you talked about, is $1 million enough, right? And the average ransomware attack is $400,000. Well, on top of that, the federal government has started fining healthcare organizations who have not done the diligence to prepare for a ransomware attack. So a small practice in Louisiana just got fined $480,000 for having a ransomware attack. So that's additive on top of all those other things. So that's driving those costs up even more, which I think drives home even more what you're talking about.
Sure.
And Shane, to your point, right? The feds came out with a committee recently in healthcare, and they said, folks, the stuff we've been doing isn't working, right? Everybody's having breaches. It's accelerating significantly. And the traditional, let's go watch an hour-long video and answer 3 questions isn't cutting it, because people are still clicking on ransomware emails. People are still doing the same things. We got to get creative and look at different ways to go about that. So I love what you talked about and how it's important, right, to get people engaged and actually get people to participate in that process. When we look at it from a compliance standpoint, right, we're kind of looking at all those things, right? In some ways, Andy, you and I look at the same stuff, right? We're looking at risk. How do we reduce the risk of the client, which also reduces your risk as the insurer?
Right.
And when we look at the risk management life cycle, right, you've got to go assess a network. You've got to remediate issues that you find, right? You've got to train staff. You've got to put policies and procedures in place. And then you've got to figure out how much risk you have left and what you can afford to manage, or what you're going to offset by buying insurance to overlay that, right? So you don't go out of business if you get hit. And in healthcare, 70% of healthcare has had a breach in the last year. And most of the time, hackers sit in your network for about as long as a full-term pregnancy before you even notice they're there, right? I mean, those are shocking numbers. So when we're looking at it, what we're really trying to do is say, back to what you said, Shane, right? We've got to simplify this for folks and get them engaged in the process, right? Make it interesting and something that they can absorb and engage with, right? So it's not so overwhelming and they just give up and stop. But we've got to be checking the right boxes. And so, if the 3 of us are working together well on behalf of a client, right, then your risks and your costs and the complexity of running your business goes significantly down, so you can focus on your core business that makes you money and what you trained and and intended to do for a living, as opposed to becoming a cybersecurity expert or an insurance expert or a training expert, right? So I love this.
What's amazing to that point, and what's amazing, and how Jason mentioned this, I know I've gone back to this well twice, but it really is the whole crux here, talking about what was going on 5 years ago, pre-COVID. The underwriting at times was, are you a marijuana shop, an adult film industry, or a casino? And then no. Okay, so have you had a breach in the last 2 years? No. Oh, great. What's your revenue? What are your employees? Here's your quote, right? So there was no underwriting. We weren't really gauging the risk, right? So were we to sit here and have this conversation in 2019, 2018, unless it was a Fortune 1000 company where they were digging in on those guys, pretty much everybody else, I didn't really have a stick to bring to the party, right? As far as making people do anything. Now, and this is what I think is phenomenal about the moment that we're in, right? So let's say Jason comes in and he's doing his job and he's got a general let's say it's a group of hospitals, right? A rural group of hospitals that are all under the same roof. And he's like, hey, this is what we need to do to become more cyber secure, right? And part of that is you guys need to put on MFA. You need to do security awareness training and phishing simulation. You need to come up with an incident response. That's what's at the cybersecurity heart of it, right? Well, Shane's going to come in and he's going to do his job. Randy's going to go, hey, all the things that Jason told you to do are going to actually make you more compliant with HIPAA. And then now, guess what? In 2024, I get to come in and I go, hey, all of that money that you guys just spent to become more cyber secure and more compliant, guess what? In 2024, now those dollars get to spend again a second time on being more insurable, right? Like you almost get double credit for your homework in a way. Like as you become more cyber secure and as you become more compliant, now because of underwriting, you're also becoming more insurable, right? So you don't have to spend money on being cyber secure and then come around and spend more money on being compliant and then come around and drop money again on being insurable. You can actually spend, if you do it the right way and you're smart about it, you can spend once and get credit in all three buckets.
No, that's absolutely true. So, I mean, hopefully everybody can see how all these pieces play together. I mean, again, technology, the mitigation strategies are huge. You have to have those things in place, but also you really want to have the training in place, the insurance, because I mean, if you just step through a typical breach and the way that it would happen, you're Bob working with company ABC, you get a phishing email. Now, if you have been properly trained, you would be able to discard that email because you've been educated on how to see a phishing email and take the appropriate, steps from there. If you're not trained, you may click that link, your credentials get compromised, or you download a ransomware payload. Now here the breach happens. Now, you should have an incident response plan that would be part of your compliance effort. And of course, part of your incident response plan would be contacting your insurance company because that money is going to be needed because you're going to be facing business income loss. Like Andy said, could be regulatory fines, it could be legal fines, all depending on the type of breach. So everything goes together. You have to train your people to lower your risk. There's no bulletproof plan. You will never eliminate risk. The best thing you can do is just get it down to what they call an acceptable level. Once your risk is at an acceptable level, you have everything in place, and those controls are being tested. And this is not just on the technical side. You have to really focus on administrative controls. You have the right policies and procedures in place, which is huge. You can't be compliant without the administrative side, and a lot of administrative stuff kind of gets swept under the rug. No one wants to write policies and procedures. No one wants to collect evidence of control testing to make sure that, yes, the proper technology is deployed, but it's actually working the way that it's supposed to. We tested our backups, because your backups are only good as your restores, right? Your DR plan is being tested to make sure that in the event something does happen to your systems, whether it's a technical disaster or a natural disaster, that you can resume business. Have you talked about those solutions and fitting into your RTO and RPO objectives? These are the conversations that need to be happening with business leaders, because maybe your backups being run nightly, maybe that's not enough. If you're not out talking to, if you're an MSP or IT staff, not talking to the business leaders, or if you're a business leader, not talking to your technical staff, so you're both on the same page of how much downtime can you actually withstand before it really starts hurting the business. So you have to have those conversations, and the technical controls can be designed within that. And all that should be spilled out in some type of policy and procedure. So everything goes hand in hand. So now it's, tell you what, I got a couple questions being popped in. Yeah, you're right, Tim. MSPs do own too much of the risk. We'll get into the MSP world in a second. But also, yeah, it really, in the compliance, kind of going back to that, I was thinking of an example as we were all talking. I'm actually working with Randy, doing some FTC safeguard work with a CPA firm. the FTC safeguard rule affects a lot of different industries. It's basically if money changes hands and you're not a bank, what they call a non-financial institution, this FTC safeguard rule applies. It's car dealers, like Andy's story, it's real estate agents, it's CPA firms, it's payday loans people. I mean, it affects a lot.
Colleges and universities. I mean, that's
exactly. Yep. Yeah, and I had a conversation with basically the ISO over the med school at Baylor, and he was voicing some concerns, because they have to comply with the FTC safeguard rules. So yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot in play, and of course, in the CPA world, they're taking it a step further now, where 2023, 2024, you can't file a tax return without having a written information security plan in place. So that's where Randy and I are working with a firm up in Dallas right now, and working through that plan. And this is kind of going back to what Shane was saying and how important security awareness training is. There's a whole section in that plan dedicated to what are you doing for training? What does your training plan look like? It's just as important as the whole section over control mitigation, the whole section over RPs, your incident response plan. So it's just, everything is so important these days. And that's one of the things that we're doing at Triad is going out there and educating these organizations to look beyond the technology, make sure the technology is there, make sure the technology is working, but make sure your policies are there and procedures, and even physical security. It's not really as big a thing now, since COVID, with pretty much, the majority of the workforce, being at home. But it is still a thing. If you go through a compliance audit, they're still going to touch on, some of the physical aspects if it's, applicable to your environment. So you just kind of have to look at everything, as the whole picture, and how, everything it ties together. And I think the last time Andy and I were talking, back on the insurances, when you look at compliance and audits, I don't think you can pass an audit without insurance, but I don't think now it's going to get harder to get insurance if you haven't been audited. So it's like you can't have one without the other. So that's just one of the this is where everything is going. The days, and I know this has been beat to death, but the days of antivirus and firewalls being enough to prevent an attack, those days are long gone. You have to have a lot of different things in place.
Jason, I think that's too. Oh, sorry, Shane, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's one of the aspects too, right? Like when somebody comes to us and goes, "Hey, I need this because of HIPAA certification or whatever it may be," that's an easy conversation, right? Here's exactly what you need. But from what I see, it's usually kind of three different pieces. It's either the person that comes to you and goes, "Hey, I know I need something. Please help me with what it is." Hey, I know I need something. I don't really want to do this. And then you have to really push it. But then there's that entire other group where it's like, hey, I didn't even realize that this was a thing, right? And they're just as at risk as everybody else. So having that conversation is a whole different thing of even just approaching those people and kind of bringing it to the light of going, hey, here are the three elements of kind of what we're kind of discussing right here, right? Here's what you need to do. Here's how you do it, or a portion of how you do it. And here's how, just in case it doesn't go right, how you cover yourself. And I think that those three elements or those three types of people that we talk to on a regular basis is a lot. That's the day-to-day on the sales side of kind of the conversation. And then from the actual implementation, it's actually getting in front of those people and showing them, hey, this is how that is structured. Because again, the people that know what they need to do are a little bit better on that front. Otherwise, you get that group where it's, hey, I have my antivirus, I got my firewall, I'm all set. Well, no, there's a lot more to it that we need to educate you on and show you really what that looks like. And like we've referenced before, 5 years, it's transitioned quite quickly to that.
No, it really has. And I think for the people who still think antivirus and firewalls are enough, I also know this Nigerian prince that has a lot of money he wants to give people. So I can send over his information. But yeah, no, it's definitely a lot deeper than that.
And Jason, I think too, what you were talking about, the documentation is a big deal. Like for instance, right? We met with a group recently and had a ransomware attack, right? So $90,000 ransomware ask and cleaning up what happened. And so my first question was, have you guys talked to your cyber insurance yet? And they said, hey, we'll call you back. right? Called the cyber insurance, forgot that they had a policy. Cyber insurance immediately had a strike team that rolled out, helped them start recovering from that, helped them put things in place, paid for, some of those pieces. So to me, having that incident response plan written out, train people on it, so you know what to do when it happens, because everybody's in a panic when it happens, right? And if you're not trained on it and you haven't documented it, people do crazy things. And to Shane's point, right? We've had groups that did training but didn't have a documented record of it and got fined for it, right? Because if it's not documented, it doesn't exist. So I think there's a lot of that that's really important, where you got to have those assets recorded, and the hard work that you're doing recorded and documented, so you get credit for it and it actually matters.
And Randy, to that point, this is one of my personal soapbox issues that, and guys, listen, I'm gonna throw some darts at insurance right here. I'm gonna tell you a way that we're not doing great. A lot of insurance applications will say, does the entity have an incident response plan? Yes or no, right? And where we need to mature, and when I'm and our team, when we are personally on these calls and these consultations, it's more than a binary yes, no, right? Is it in place? Can we see a copy of it, right? Like, is it in the physical form? And it needs to be customized to your organization. It needs to be offline, not just a CISA template that I love the guys at CISA, so I'm not dissing me poo-poo and CISA. Love them to death. They're phenomenal for what they do. But not a downloaded CISA template, slap our name on it, right? So customized, offline, which I get all kinds of giggles on that. But like, guys, if your incident response plan is on your network and you don't have access to your network, guess what? You don't have an incident response plan, right? So customized, offline, tested, right? Like, have we done a tabletop? I mean, I'm an old coach, right? If all we did was take ground balls and hit batting practice for 2 weeks or excuse me, 2 months before a game, and we never scrimmaged, right? I would think that we would probably struggle in our first live game, right? So tested. And then the last thing is it regularly updated, or do you have the same breach, or did you do it once for insurance requirements in 2019 and the document looks the exact same then, and you're in healthcare? I mean, Randy, to your point, what's turnover looked like in healthcare in the last 3 years, right? It's been insane. How many people sit on boards or in position of influence that are, weren't there 6 months ago or 12 months ago. So that thing needs to be customized. It needs to be offline. It needs to be tested. It needs to be regularly updated. And man, when, again, insurance does not hold them to that standard currently. Andy does, Fifth Wall does, because we know that our relationship with our clients is more than just binding a policy, right? So when we get into that, and I'm going to be honest, for those of you out there in the crowd, if I went through that cascade of 4 things and you went, ugh, like that's not us, don't worry, you're in 95% of the business world does not meet those 4 requirements. I mean, I would say at least 9 out of 10, if we ask them those 4 things, they don't meet those.
Yeah, I mean, and that's massively important. And that's a great point. Yeah, IRPs are so important to have, to be updated on a regular basis. Do your tabletop exercises, hold lessons learned, meetings after the tabletop, because that plan is something that has to be continuously improved upon, to Randy's point, because everyone needs to know what their role and responsibility is when a breach occurs. Who's contacting who's contacting the insurance company to get them engaged and get the claim process rolling. Who's contacting the IT company to come out, who's contacting the forensics company. That everyone should know is if a ransomware attack happens, I know this person does this person does that. We've tested it. Everybody knows it's a kind of a well-oiled machine. That way you can get back up and running. And there's like a article I read actually last night. It made me think about this webinar. It was a healthcare provider in Tennessee had a ransomware attack towards the end of last month. And on day 14, they were still piecemealing their systems together. So if you think 14 days after the attack was known, and to Randy's point earlier, there's no telling how long the bad actors were sitting on the network, before actually, dropping the payload and encrypting everything. And just to think that 14 days, a healthcare, provider is still trying to get access back to, the actual technology systems where they can see patients appropriately. So it's just mind blowing, because you think about, if they probably had the proper training, it may have never happened in the first place. If they had the proper incident response plan, maybe they could have recovered faster than 14 days if it didn't take them even longer than that. And hopefully they had insurance in place, because I can only imagine, what a breach like this is costing them, just on the various levels. So yeah, that's but it just speaks to why these things are so important. That's why I wanted to put this webinar together. Is just those cases, those things are still happening, and it's still out of control. And really, the reason behind these type of breaches is because these type of mitigation strategies, when it comes to the compliance side and aligning and testing your posture, and that's when when it goes unknown, that's when breaches like this happen. So make sure that you're focused more on that antivirus and firewall, and things like this may not happen. Randy, did you see the article that I'm talking about? I don't know if you're familiar with them at all. I can't remember if I shared it with you last night.
I didn't see that one. What I thought you were going to talk about, we're dealing with the Health Department of Maryland. They had a breach in December of 2019, and they're still, or excuse me, of 2021, 2 years ago, and they're still have systems that they're trying to get back online.
Okay, well, I need to share that. It's on my LinkedIn if you want to check it out.
Yeah, no, it's painful, but it's so true, and it's what we're running into every day.
Okay, we got about 15 minutes. I want to jump into some questions. Andy, let's do this. If someone, business leader wise, MSP wise, that they're supporting their clients, if what they've heard from you today makes them question, do I really have the coverage that I need? I'm not really sure. Where do they start? I mean, how do you kick off the process to make sure that they get it right?
Well, so first of all, I mean, the easy answer is call us at Fifth Wall Solutions. We'll say, hey, right. Here's the honest answer, right? Go to your trusted insurance partner, right? Like, go to whoever has your insurance. And guys, here's the thing with cyber. Do they have a cyber specialist, right? And what I mean by cyber specialist is there somebody at that agency that knows cyber and that's their focus, right? I'm not talking about like your buddy from SMU, back in '93 that you drank beers with at the Pike House, right? Like that's fine on those other lines of insurance. It really isn't okay on cyber, because cyber is newer, it's tougher. So listen, if your local insurance agent or your local relationship that does all your other stuff, if you go to them and say, hey, do you have anybody that knows cyber, that's a cyber specialist? And they say, yeah, Bob handles all of our cyber stuff and we've got access to 20 markets. Great. If not, that's where we come in. And what we would suggest, and guys, honestly, that's the answer more often than not. Where we come in is with specialized education. I'm trying to share there, Jason. Are you able to see what I'm sharing?
Give me 1 second.
I've got what I've got pulled up right here, and I'm showing that I'm sharing. I'm hoping everybody can see that. We lead with education on what types of losses you can incur. The three main: funds transfer fraud, third-party liability, ransomware, business interruption. And then based on that heat map, where does that intersect with your sector that you're in? And then this is the biggest piece right here. And we've already mentioned it, but I was just going to show you how it works live on Channel 5.
Try it now, Andy. I just made you the host. Try it now.
Okay, try again. Let's see.
There you go.
There we go. Is it on? Yep. So we'll heat map and we'll discuss what are the three main types of losses, right? And how do they intersect with your sector? But this is the piece right here, guys, that, we've talked a lot today about how do I know how much insurance to buy? Well, based on actual losses, 5 years trailing, we can go in based on your sector, based on your revenue, your employees, and create a custom report that says, hey, we don't know this for sure, but we can put you in a ballpark. And Shane's point earlier, I thought this was great. He was talking about reducing risk, right, through cybersecurity measures. and then transferring it with insurance, if we don't reduce that risk, I mean, this is a $100 million healthcare entity right here. This is a regional ortho provider that we're working on right now. If they don't reduce the risk and they run a 60-day loss, I mean, if they're still down 60 days, they're looking at $16 million. Guess what? You can't buy $16 million in insurance on the open market with poor controls. It's not going to happen, right? So let's go in, let's put the security measures in place to reduce that risk. And then now you go, okay, we're pretty confident that we could get spun back up in 10 days. Based on these numbers, we need to go to market for $5 million in insurance. And now that you've got the controls in place, you can do that. And then the other part that I would say with insurance is, guys, make sure that somebody is telling you the full story and not just giving you kind of half truths from the market. We see a lot. Oh, it's a hard market, man. Premiums are going up 4x and it's terrible out there. It's really not. I mean, it hasn't been since March. I think it will be heading into 2024 because of the activity and losses. I think it's going to tighten up. But absolutely, if you've got the right controls in place, find somebody that'll tell you, like for this $100 million entity, the upper range of what you could pay in the market. There are people out there that look just like this that are paying $150,000, $160,000 for insurance. There are almost identical organizations that are paying 45 with half or a fourth of the deductible with full limits, right? So that's kind of what I would, my overarching thing would be find you a relationship that can bring that specialized education of how could you get hit within your sector, what's specific, help you come up with a reduction and transfer strategy to know kind of where you're at and how much insurance you could buy, and then bring some like honest transparency to the table of what you should be paying based on your security structure, and then the money that you've invested to become cybersecure, the money that you've invested on security awareness training or phishing simulation, the money you've invested with Randy on compliance. All of that should give you credit in the modern insurance world. That should be reducing premium, reducing deductibles, raising limits, not just somebody sitting there going, yeah, I know you spent 40 grand on cybersecurity, but hard market, here's another 40 grand on your
Yeah.
insurance.
Yeah, well, I think everybody can see how complex this is now. So definitely, appreciate that information. And yeah, if anybody out there is concerned about their coverage, start somewhere. Just make sure, because insurance is one of those things where you're going to wish you had it. You hope you never have to use it, but you gotta have it. You need to really. And Shane, over to you, just real quick. If there's organizations out there, what's your advice on where to start to kind of ensure that staffs are being trained appropriately?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what Andy said, in the sense of kind of validating what's actually happening currently, right? Of, hey, what are we doing as far as training? What are we doing as far as phishing testing? What does that experience look like? And how is that really being received by end users as well? I think that's a big aspect of it. Again, going back to the being digestible and having that being able to really sink in, that is a huge aspect of it, right? So I think understanding those, that landscape, and then really asking the people that are using it, right? If it's something that you're not doing and you're just doing it to check a box, not ideal. But you want to deliver it a much further place where you're getting the people on board, because adoption is key in the training and the phishing side. You can always check the box, but really, if you never want to have to get to the portion where Andy's having to deal with it, it's ultimately, let's get ahead of that and have people get behind it before you get to that point.
What, based on your experience, what would you say is the best frequency to administer the training? Should it be monthly, quarterly, or what's your take on that?
So usually for the training, we suggest monthly. That kind of fits with most frameworks. I would say if you're doing it every week, a little bit too hectic. Quarterly is a little bit too infrequent. So we always suggest monthly on that front. I think phishing testing is one where you can get a little bit more heavy on that front. One, it's one of the biggest kind of open doors that could potentially be there. And the good part is, if you're doing training or if you're doing phishing testing the right way, hopefully nobody's clicking on it and they don't even realize they're getting four over the course of the month, right? So I would say definitely monthly across the board on both of those. I like bi-weekly for phishing testing, and making sure that you're getting at least a training a month for those users.
And
Awesome.
not to steal the mic, but very quickly, where insurance is moving. Used to it was, does your group, does your company offer security awareness training? Yes or no, right? Now
Yeah.
it's, do you offer security awareness training with phishing simulation, and how often, right? So just so you know, if you're trying to skate and you're just wanting to do an hour-long video once a year and call it security awareness training, insurance is going to sniff that out. They're going to ask if phishing simulations in that and how often that's occurring. The more you do it, the better your, ship is tightened, the lower the rate.
Yeah. And once you have it in place, you have to have that policy and procedure that's documented around your security awareness training and proof of the training. So you have to have reports. Now kick it over. We'll kind of wrap it up with Randy. We only have a couple minutes left. So I know a lot of organizations out there, Randy, they're some are obvious, the regulatory compliance when we talk about financial and healthcare. But what about other organizations that may not know if they should be compliant to a certain type of framework? I know there's a lot of frameworks out there that are optional. You're not required. There's no NIST audit. There's there's a lot of organizations that do SOC 2 and ISO just because it kind of positions them better in their own market. And all this is happening outside of being quote unquote forced to do it, like in some industries. So for organizations out there that might be interested in pushing towards compliance or at least aligning their posture with a framework, what are your thoughts on that? Where should they start?
Sure. I think to your point, right, it's not going to be long where everybody's going to face one or the other, right? Between new laws from SEC for every publicly traded company, FTC safeguards, so on and so forth. I think it's going to be tough to operate as a business without having some type of compliance. We typically start folks with CIS, used to be the CIS top 20. It's a sort of non-industry specific set of best practices for compliance and cybersecurity that takes you through the full gamut of questions and types of things you should do without deep diving into a particular industry. So for us, that's a good starting point for folks, and it's not overwhelming for small businesses. To put it in perspective, in a controlled industry like healthcare, where we spend a lot of our time, our average first-time risk assessment for a client is about 35% out of 100 average. So in a regulated industry where it's law and they're forced to do it, we're typically starting there. And a lot of it is things like Andy and Shane talked about, right? Like Andy, when you talked about having an incident response plan, checking a box is one thing. Having one that's actually customized, that's tested, right? And those are the kind of things we do with the compliance, right? I'll give you policy templates. I give you 150 of them. But if you don't make them your own, if you don't go beyond just putting the name of the health system on it, if you don't train your folks on it, right? All those types of things, it doesn't change anything, right? And on the other side of that, right, we're working with hospital groups right now where the amount of due diligence and process and documentation we've put in place is almost paying for their cyber insurance because of the reduction, or excuse me, the other way around. The reduction in their cyber insurance premiums is almost paying for what we do. So what you were saying before, Andy, getting that double credit, I love how you said that, right? Where you spend the same money, but you're spend it intelligently on the right things. Right. And if you don't go through an assessment, you have no idea where you should be applying that, right? So that's where I think it's so important to talk to guys like Andy and understand, how does this impact my cyber insurance, right? Talk to me or Shane about, how does this specifically apply to a regulatory standard, right? What classes do I need to take? What do I need to do with phishing? What policies and procedures do I have in place? So I think, we, as you can tell, I think the four businesses, right, all go well together, right? Because we're all working for the same things, just from different angles, trying to assist you with important pieces of this, because it's overwhelming to take on by yourself, right? Because you're a doctor or a scientist or an oil engineer or fill in the blank, not a cybersecurity specialist or an insurance specialist. So we love to help clarify that, make it easier, make it affordable, and put it in place. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I think the biggest takeaways here for everybody listening is start the conversation. Make sure you're properly insured. And I say properly in all caps, properly insured. Make sure you're being trained, and make sure you have a network assessment done. See how your security posture does stack up to industry best practices. It's saying it's a hard and fast requirement. And you're going to be fined if you don't do it. It's really good to exercise proper cyber hygiene, and that's the best way to do it, is to see where you stack up with the best practices from CIS, from NIST. And if you actually do face regulatory restrictions around the framework, yeah, you definitely need to be doing that, whichever industry that you're in. We hit 3:00, guys. We're going to wrap this up. Andy, if you could kick me back over to host, I'll stop the recording, and I'll make sure everybody gets a copy of this who's attended. Definitely appreciate everyone for listening to us for the past hour. Hopefully you saw some value and some takeaways and in all this information. And guys, definitely appreciate you having a conversation with me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Jason. Great to talk with you guys.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Everybody have a great rest of the day, and we will talk again soon. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
See y'all.
Take care, y'all.